Okay, good morning, everyone. And I want to start here to make it clear that we do not want to abolish the College of Trades. But the College of Trades is out of control. If they make more compulsory trades, thousands of jobs will be lost. Who does what is already decided by the Ontario Relations Board. Enforcement is out of control, harassing workers and apprentices for fees that get them nothing, no understanding of overlap and the OLRB precedents. To us, the way we look at it and the way people look at it out there is just a cash grab. We're asking Ontario to place an immediate moratorium on any new compulsory trades. And we need to transfer the enforcement offices to the Ministry of Labor. I'm not going to pass it over here to Brother Robert Petroni, which is the business manager of Local 625 in Windsor, as he's had some better experience there with Ontario College of Trades, and he's going to share some of the incidents that happened there. So go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Jack. First of all, I'd like to thank Jack Oliveira, Local 183 business manager, for inviting me here today. I believe that the reason I'm here today is it seems that Windsor seems to be the first battleground with respect to construction and the Ontario College of Trades. As Jack said, my name is Rob Petroni. I'm the business manager of LIUNA 625. We represent a little over 1,400 workers in the Windsor area. I'm also with Jack on the executive board of LIUNA's Ontario Provincial District Council that represents upwards more than 60,000 workers in the province of Ontario. The reason that I'm here, there's a great deal of negativity surrounding OCOT. Some of the arguments very well put. I'm not going to get into those arguments. I've listened, I've read the news, I've heard all of the horror stories. I'm just going to share some insight into actually what's happening in the Windsor area. So we have this little project called the Right Honourable Herb Gray Parkway that employs a great many of our members as well as other trades. And we have a collective agreement on that parkway, as do other building trades, by virtue of their employers being there. We've had labor peace on that project since it began. And in 2012, two important things happened. The first thing that happened was one of the trades, the IBEW, called the Ministry of Labor, complaining that workers other than electricians were doing work of the electrician. In 2012, the Ministry of Labor showed up and ruled in writing that, in fact, that work was not of a licensed electrician because of years of history and exemptions and such. Fast forward a few months later, LIUNA and the IBEW enter into a collective agreement together depicting the work on the parkway, and we both sign it and we agree on its terms. Now comes along OCOT enforcers, a new tool for some people to use as highly paid business representatives for their union. And the OCOT inspectors come on site and start warning our members that they'll be fined, warning the contractors that they'll be fined. Some of the fines that they were spewing off about were upwards of $5,000. What work are we talking about? Well, we don't know. It's black and white, they tell us. It's in the regulations. Just read the regulations. Well, I have. And the regulations are very old. Grounding is a regulation. I ironed my shirt this morning. I ground the iron. I'm not sure if that's work of an electrician or not. No OCOT inspector came to my hotel room. If it's on a construction site, is it supposed to be an electrician? So when we met with OCOT and asked about the work in question so we can straighten it out, no answers. So we basically told OCOT to issue tickets, which they did, 5 of them on the parkway. And those tickets are to a company called Stacy Electric. And the tickets say, for the infraction, work performed by a non-309A electrician on the Parkway project. What work? Who knows? When we asked the enforcement officers, it's a privacy issue. Can't tell us. It's against their privacy policy. So we're right back to square one. We're fighting the tickets. Recently, last week, one of my contractors called who was operating an electric concrete saw inside a building. The OCOT inspector showed up, asked him, 1, where he got the generator to run the saw, and 2, who plugged the saw in. The inspector left without issuing any tickets, but warned our contractor, who is the owner, that he may not be qualified to run the saw that he owns and has run for 20 years. Another contractor in the Windsor area was approached by the OCOT officers, who, by the way, I'm saying, for the most part, aren't skilled or have any knowledge in the construction industry. They were approached by the OCOT officers and asked to have a meeting with them, an electrical contractor. And apparently now in the province of Ontario, forming and pouring concrete that holds wire is the work of an electrician, a licensed electrician. That would create chaos in our industry. The OCOT officers in our area, one of them is a young man who was a fry cook that handed out resumes everywhere, and on his objectives of his resume, he wanted to be an electrician apprentice. So I don't think it's by any sort of far stretch that that person is the one out there enforcing only the electrician's trade. Keep in mind, on the Parkway, Stacy Electric works beside a number of other electrical contractors who are performing the work in the same manner. But those electrical contractors don't have a collective agreement with a union and therefore aren't being harassed. So there's millions of other stories like that. I can go on for days. Just in my area, which I know about. I know the chair of OCOT, Ron Johnson, was quoted in the Brant News as saying the time has come, or time has passed for us to complain about OCOT and that we can't do anything about it. For those of you that don't know where Windsor is, it's on the other side of London. And last night when I was driving here, I passed a number of flags that happened to have the maple leaf on it, not a hammer and sickle. So, to Mr. Johnson, I would like to say, apparently we have an election coming up, and I'm sure that there's something that we can do about it. Thank you.
Is there any questions that I...
Well, it mentions in the briefing notes here that the Carpenters Union has recently made a proposal to OCOT to designate carpentry as a compulsory trade. Is there any background you can provide on why the Carpenters Union would have put in that request?
Well, you know what? I think it's time that the government starts to really analyze, and that's a perfect scenario there, where another probably union is trying to use government means to capture jurisdiction. And I believe that if, you know, the carpenters, as an example, as Local 183 has probably more carpenters alone than the carpenters themselves throughout the province, that if it did come to a point where our carpenters need certification, then LIUNA should be doing the certification for our carpenters and not any other union anyways. I believe this is a conversation for later down the road. It's a little bit too early to go into those details right now. But I am of the opinion that LIUNA should be training and certify our own trades if there ever was the need, which I believe that LIUNA, basically, it's not a compulsory trade anyways. But at the end of the day, that's, like I said, a discussion for another day.
If I could weigh in on that, the answer is pretty simple. To be a compulsory trade, so if you look at the Trades Qualification Act, the terms are very loose. For example, for a licensed electrician, grounding and bonding. What does that mean? Does it mean digging the trench, backfilling the trench? Does it mean attaching the ground wires? Does it mean bonding the ground? We don't know what it means. And they're compulsory. Any new trade that comes along and gets compulsory status now has those regulations, which are very loose and very old, in their back pocket. So for example, and I haven't studied the carpenter's one yet, hopefully I will never have to, I'm sure it says the cutting of wood. Can I build a deck in my backyard? When we build a shelf on a construction site to hold a microwave oven, is that going to be the work of the carpenter or the electrician? Because now we have some electrical components. So if you become compulsory, you now have OCOT as your stick to go out into the community and change the assignments that the Ministry of Labor has handed down for years to different trades. It's been disputed at the Ontario Labour Relations Board for years. That's the avenue that all of the trades go to figure out who does what, and it's worked fine. And that's why we're asking for immediately that the Ministry of Labor has handed back the duties of enforcement.
Are they currently with training colleges and universities as the overseers of the college? Are they the ones that are creating and sending out the enforcement officers now?
Not to my understanding. To my understanding, it may be the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities.
So these
But I'm not sure.
enforcement officers from the Ontario College of Trades, who, you mentioned earlier that there's some concern over whether they are skilled or qualified enough to be assessing these issues in the workplace?
When you think about the Ontario College of Trades, there's a number of trades. Some of them are construction, some of them aren't. For example, hairdressing is compulsory. So when you're hiring a hairdresser to go and check out hairdressing shops, that's one thing. But when that hairdresser steps foot onto a construction site and starts telling a construction craft worker that he's not or she's not skilled enough to do that work, that in fact they need to be a licensed whatever, I have grave concerns over that.
If I just might add here to what Brother Rob Petroni said, is it's very simple. Jurisdiction is usually decided at the labor board, not by OCOT on job sites. And that should clear any misinformation that is out there. I'd hate to see a cook going on a job site and telling an electrician that, you know what, if you don't have a ticket, you cannot form that footing and you cannot place the plastic conduit in there because you don't have a ticket. I mean, come on. I mean, are we going to go down the road where we're going to buy a barbecue at a Canadian Tire very soon? Because people need to know these things. And next thing you know, you're not going to be able to finish that project at home on a weekend. You're going to have to get the gas fitter and the millwright come and put the barbecue together for you. Come on. I mean, that's the direction this is going. It's getting out of hand.
If you equate it to the Highway Traffic Act, it's the same, what's happening in Windsor, because keep in mind, we don't know what the work is that we're being ticketed for. So it's the same as a police officer stopping me on the way here and issuing me a ticket. And it just says, as per the Highway Traffic Act. I don't know if I was speeding. I don't know if I had a seatbelt infraction. I don't know what the infraction was. And now I have to go to court and argue over a ticket that the police officer quite honestly told me is a privacy issue. Couldn't put it in writing what the work is. So what my thinking is that these officers are vague purposely to steer the work towards an organization that wants the work, to steer the work towards an organization that quite possibly may be steering the enforcement officers. And we've been told that the enforcement officers are driven by complaints. So when we suggest, why are you not checking out the underground economy, we're too busy responding to complaints. And who's making the complaints? The organizations that want the work. We don't think that OCOT was set up to be like that. We were certainly not explained that for the last few years. And when Mr. Johnson says it's too late to argue about it now because the time was back when it was being formulated, I just think is false. Had we been given the proper information and had we known what the enforcement officers were going to look like, feel like, and act like, then maybe we would have said something back then.
So I think it's very important that they transfer, these officers back to the labor board what they should be to start with anyway, so there's no confusion.
Do you think it's an issue behind that? It's what I got in the end, probably.
So if I dummy it down a bit, I could approach a hairdresser and ask that hairdresser to apply for a job at OCOT and get a job at OCOT as an inspector, and then influence that person to go on construction sites and tell whoever they want, whatever they want, about work that is our members' work. I could do that right now, the way that it's set up, because the regulations are so loose. Regulation for a construction craft worker that we represent says forming of concrete. Regulation for a carpenter that we don't represent says forming of concrete. So if OCOT comes along and both trades are compulsory, who's doing the work? The answer is whoever the labor board has said does that work for the last 50 years, and the Ministry of Labor. So yes, I think it could be used as a tool. I believe it could.
That's why sometimes you get these conflicts, because I remember sitting for LIUNA on the Ministry of Training and Colleges for the CCW, construction craft worker, many years ago, and basically they said, yeah, you got to form, you got to pour, got to level, and now next thing you know, you got OCOT coming around and say, no, you don't do all that. So you know what, something needs to be done very quick on this. There's a need because it's disrupting all our job sites. The workforces out there is creating very bad atmosphere when it comes, you know, to job sites nowadays. You know, we constantly get calls from our members saying, "What is it that we tell these guys?" Says, you know, keep doing your job, because it just doesn't make sense what they're doing on sites. You know, their job, it's clearly not to go there and tell a contractor or a member that it's not your job. The labor board decides that if there's an issue. And I think by putting these enforcement officers back to the board, you know, it'll be the beginning of trying to, you know, correct the problem. Not that it's going to be all corrected just by doing that, but at least it'll be the beginning of, you know, of something positive here towards the construction industry.
We believe that the urgency for the moratorium is because if there is an election called, then we're going to have OCOT looking at new compulsory trades during the election, when the writ is dropped. After the election, it's a long turnaround time before we can get to anybody to talk to during the process of an election or after an election. So in those 8-9 months in between, the entire industry can be changed. I have to tell you, on the Parkway in Windsor, there's been no work disruptions. There have been no strikes, no issues, no worker issues. And on this particular site, because of OCOT, the contractor sent workers home because they were so confused and so scared of the fines that they were going to get. They had no idea. We had to agree to pay for the fines in order to get the workers back to work. We, LIUNA, had to say, we'll pay the fines and we will go on your behalf to court, which nobody knows what court, in order to fight the fines, in order to get our workers back to work. So imagine 8 or 9 months during an election period with all of this going on.
If I may. Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Fatima, representing Family Portuguesa newspaper. I take one of your words. Are those people going to the site, are they well trained and the right people to tell, you can't do that?
You know, where am I to answer that question on behalf of the government? But I'd like to tell you that as laborers, when we get someone that goes out there to do a job that is related to the labor trade, we make sure that we have people that have at least 20, 25 years under their belt of experience in order to go and perform well out there. I don't think that's the case with the College of Trades, as we have the perfect scenario where we have a guy who was a cook all his life and all of a sudden he's out there on a construction site telling people what to do, not knowing, you know, exactly what the trade is about. So I really cannot speak on behalf of the government for that. I mean, I guess they make their own choices and they leave with what they choose. At the end of the day, I'm of the opinion that if you're going to get someone to do a job, the person should have experience, particularly in classifications and positions like that. So.
The local 183 or LIUNA contact that office to get questions? Anybody answer?
OCOT? Yeah, we have met with OCOT in the Toronto area. I'm going to say one time. They came to our delegates meeting once. We've tried on numerous occasions to meet with the inspectors in the Windsor area. We've only met with them once for an hour, at which point they couldn't tell us in that hour what the work involved for the ticketing was because it was a privacy issue, is what we were told.
I don't think those inspectors are too sure themselves of what they're doing out there anyway, so we're going to leave it at that.
And you indicate as well in the briefing note here that you believe that this is simply a cash grab by OCOT. Can you elaborate on why you believe that that's the case?
Again, I can only speak from the Windsor experience. There's a lot of horror stories like that around the province. We have a pre-apprentice course, a level 1 apprenticeship and a level 2 apprenticeship, which gets the person red sealed construction craft worker. This year we have 16 level 1 apprentices in our course. They're there right now, and one of our apprentices just received a letter saying his apprenticeship with the MTCU is canceled because he forgot to pay the fee. So my staff is now working, and I don't know the status of it, to try and get his apprenticeship back on track by paying the fee. Is it a money grab? I'll let you decide.
If I just may share another example that has come to my attention through one of my reps, and basically it's a particular trade what it's calling for a certification, and we have he's not a member of the labor, he's a member of a different union, but because we're always on sites trying to monitor what's going on. This person came up to one of our reps and said, so I've written the test 4 times. Now they're telling me that if I fail the 5th time, I can't do this job anymore. He says, that's all I've done all my life. So are they, putting me here into misery now? He says, I'm 58 years old, and basically, what do I do after this? Because this is all I know how to do. Now this, it's going to start to repeat itself in other areas as well. So, there's really many ramifications here that will impact the future and livelihood of our members and families and everywhere else as well.
Unless there's any other questions, I think that's about all we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.